I guess it's good to practice some English sometimes. Not only listening, but speaking. You rarely do it if you're living in a country where it's not the official, what do you call the common language or the official language, like in Sweden. Unless you're working on a workplace where they speak English, that could happen, but I don't. So, nope. Basically, never speaking English. To be, if yeah, actually, never, ever, unless I'm doing these videos. And I think I should probably do it more in English. I should probably do every other one in English, but it's and yeah, it might be some hurdles, making it somewhat more difficult to perhaps develop speech or anything, and speak with more accuracy. I'm not so sure it's that limiting somewhat if you're searching for a word, but I've never felt that, but you're still somewhat handicapped in the way that you yeah. I mean, of course the brain is probably more engaged or challenged in a way, but it's still so natural to speaking English, so I don't think it's too bad. But there is some small, perhaps, I shouldn't dwell on this too much, but I mean, especially when you, I think it would be worse if you're having a debate, which you should not have. I don't think it, perhaps I'm too extreme on this sometimes, but I don't even think that debate should be a thing. I mean, it's a debate, when you use the word debate, it's as if, well, perhaps you can, in a competitive set, force out some more rhetorical twist that's like, even like on hormonal basis, that it gets more out of your brain if you're sort of competitive, really trying to beat someone else's argument and so forth. But in general, if you're trying for truth, I mean, which you should, I mean, it's the worst thing you can do, because you're just building the walls over the irrationality in your mind be deeper, and what you're shouting out, you're pounding in, as Munger would put it. And if you're pounding something in your mind, you ruin your mind, because it's won't be able to. I mean, and discussion should be, and you could be right in all your arguments, but if you're not susceptible or open to that you could be wrong, then you're not a real thinker at all. So, and then you're not smart. And who wants to be dumb? Well, could be more fun sometimes, maybe. Or you could be dumb, smart, dumb, smart, smart, dumb, dumb. So yes, that's, I think, the only perhaps a scenario where it would be a handicap that you're, but I'm sure I would use that style anyway, that forceful style. But yeah, language could probably be a hurdle to handle if there was a debate. But anyway, I have no reason to delve deeper in that subject right now, I think. So what should I speak? I talked quite a lot about training, workout, the gym last time, several times. I'm sure I mean, maybe it's sort of getting too much focus for me, but I still think it's interesting, and well, it's engaging. That's a good way to put it. But actually today it was quite of a called? Flop. We call it in Swedish. See, challenging to find my words here in English, but it was a failure, sort of. I was about to speak about what I just saw, and really, which was not at all about training and exercise, but actually more sort of philosophical or interesting discussions on life and stuff. Well, what start with just sort of, should call it sort of diary type of things. What I do during my day, I was about to sail with my friend's boat and another friend, and we dropped a ring of gold in the water beside the sailboat that was supposed to hinder the what's it called, fuel tank to not leak, which is not a good thing that you drop that in the water, because if that happens, there's nothing that will keep the fuel where it's not supposed to be. So we did some diving and gave up way too early, in my opinion, but I didn't want to push it. We could have found it. I mean, Smeagol never did give up. Why should I give up? I found it. It was actually gold. He described it to me. I never saw it, but I should have. If I only did 2-3 attempts after him, and I was the one who realized that it actually was possible to get down, because we throw in the anka, which is that in English, I don't know, the thing that makes the boat stop when you throw it in water. What's it called? Anka in Swedish. Who cares? The thing that you catch from the boat, catch. Now I'm speaking Finnish. Throw from the boat and down into the water to the bottom. And yeah, anyway, I really felt like a Navy SEAL. Right? It is actually. I have some issue with dark. I've never considered myself someone who's afraid of water or swimming, especially if in your pool. I mean, it's, of course, if you're stuck and you can't get up, everyone would sort of have some dealing with panic if it's life-threatening. But like if it's light, but when it's dark in water, that's it is somewhat more challenging. And but I've accustomed to it, because I had a friend with a lot of fishing and stuff when we were young, and he was very, not at all like very, what do you call it in English, framfusig. Well, he just did stuff, and I've always, when you're diving in and it's not super sunny, or it is, but when it is close to sort of human-made things like bridges and chains going down, it's hard for me to not think sort of what if I get sort of stuck in a chain, or touch some sharp thing of metal that cut up my arm or something. I mean, that's not that. Who cares if I start to bleed or something? But it's still somewhat not comfortable to dive under things, because the dark's quite fast, and you know that you can't breathe for too long, and it's something. So I can respect like sort of marine soldier going down, diving deep in something dark, and it's sort of disoriented, because that was the first thing I realized when I started to dive after this thing, and what my friends said, it's too deep, but it was not deep at all, but or it's somewhat deep, but the first thing I realized when I got down to find this thing is where I had no idea where I was. I was not, and it's not that bad. It's not that good sight in that water in the Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is somewhat but well, it depends on what you compare to, I guess. But it's not like the ocean, and so. But then was when we realized we could throw down the Ankara with a line that I could just go after, and then which was much easier. But then I was much more. But still, when I got up, I was still not sure in what direction at all that I was focusing on. So I had really can have some respect for that, of doing stuff in the dark, underwater, deep down, close to human-made things. Like that's a challenge. But I also thought about it, like, because when he started talking he would die for it, I started to think like, okay, yeah, that's I like it that he actually got the idea that he would do it, but I don't like that we gave up so fast. But they actually, I would probably come to the same conclusion, but it somewhat surprised me that we actually would do it, because I myself have some sort of hesitation towards doing it, like, especially when it's around a lot of boats and these things they have between boats and the chains that go down. It just feels like getting stuck there, not so pleasant. But that's just the mind. I can't see why it would be dangerous. If an engine is on, of course, you don't want that propeller on you. But I don't know. Maybe that's not even dangerous. Well, I guess it is. Especially on the head. It's metal. But anyway, it's so. But when I thought about it myself going in, it didn't feel that challenging, but it was still some small sort of hurdle that I had to, like, okay, it's just. But that thought came into my mind when I thought about, like, the military going down and fixing boat underwater and so forth. So it was it was a fun thing to do. But anyway, the thing about it was we gave up, which I think is weak, but I didn't want to push it. I mean, so we did not sail that day. We did not sail today, and but I at least get some time to do this video and watch some things on YouTube. But and also train. Actually, I was a bit surprised by myself how easy it was to lift deadlifts. So maybe I'll start to talk about that anyway. But so that's something I planned to rest today, but didn't want to. Too fun to. We'll probably rest tomorrow instead. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, all this I thought talk about was how often when you stumble into some sort of philosophy or people who have thought a lot, hopefully they eventually come to questions like, and like Herbert Simmons says that one of the most scarce or valued things, I don't know the exact quote, but is human consciousness, or no, attention, basically, because with attention is what determines basically everything in your life. Like your attention, first of all, you're not aware of what's going into your mind when you're always selecting, and that's based on a lot, but you're also taking sort of conscious, not conscious, but you're taking decisions that you're sort of conscious of, but you're not really a decision about what you're having your attention directed towards, but you're not sort of that conscious of. You're not actually taking sort of informed or thoughtful decision. You're just doing, and most people, I guess, actually don't think about it in that terms. Like what you're focusing on is determines what your mind is going to be. That's like everything you so if you chose to go to train and exercise, that's an opportunity got you could have done something else, focus on something else, but exercise is good, so that's probably should do that. There are many things that's not as good at all as exercising. So, but yes, that fundamental question of where your attention is, and like, are you digesting things, or are you swallowing things from a book that you read, or a video that you watched that was of someone who was a mind that could improve your mind, meaning that the person is accomplished in some way or have high ability in some things that is desirable and can make you much more skilled, especially in things that your strengths are, and so forth. I mean, most people they just are, and they just do things that's fun, and I do that too, and it's hard to know how much fun you should do and how much you should do like constructive things and what's what and that. But that's actually one topic that this guy talked about. I stumbled into him in one video with someone I've seen some time and I've found sort of intelligent but don't know too much about. And he was interviewing this new guy that I've never heard about, and I found it somewhat argumentative, but still had interesting philosophical thoughts that it's been a long time that I've been engaged in philosophical things. And when I say philosophical, I don't just mean some things that many people call philosophy, because philosophy, well, there's a lot of what people call philosophy which is not perhaps challenging philosophy. So what should you call it? Well, never mind. But when you come when you talk about philosophy of life and those kind of questions, it can get quite easy that you can still call it philosophy, even if it's not perhaps on that high of a level. But never mind. It doesn't necessarily have to be, perhaps, I don't know. But what I'm talking about is sort of more deeper philosophical. Like, for example, the reductionism, that's the thing, something he sort of challenged. And so that reductionism is something that, for me, I don't, it depends on what, I mean, the way of viewing science in that way is something that's sort of compelling to me, but I don't know if I like the way that we talk about consciousness in that way, because it's way too, I mean, it's just assuming that it just popped up and that's the end of the mystery. That's at least how it appears to me sometimes. So that it's obviously something that we're really are very far from understanding, and which is makes it even more interesting. I mean, so it's probably a discovery, like now we know about, or I guess we know about atoms and their atom numbers and the whole periodic system, and just how they do stuff. I mean, the whole that thing, it's like when we're in the, I think it's called alchemy in English too, alchemy, the stage before chemistry became, when they just mixed things together and thought they could create gold. That stage, it seems as we're in that stage, or maybe even further from it, in the understanding of consciousness and that connection to science and stuff. We're just scratching at the surface, but there will probably be breakthroughs. But anyway, that was not what they really talked about at all. And why they did talk about consciousness, but not in that way. That was actually another way, because they talked about reductionism, and he had some objection to it, but I don't remember exactly. But I found him still interesting to listen to, and it popped up and never. It was quite a short video, and I couldn't find a link to the whole video. And anyway, another one popped up with Lex Friedman. Always a good interview, so I watched that one, and it was, but I didn't watch everything. Quite a short chunk of it. It was over 3 hours long, so, and it was not as engaged. I didn't think I had the time to see it all, and I did not think it was not so engaging that I felt it was worth my time. It was quite that's actually somewhat interesting, because when you're searching for something really interesting, engaging, and that will sort of challenging and develop your thoughts. I mean, it's very similar. I would be surprised if it's not the exact same process as when you're searching for something fun to look at. It's just a dopamine thing, and if it's not interesting, it's the same thing. If it's not engaging in sort of, wow, it's a big bear wrestling with a crocodile, yeah, if it's really, I would probably watch it because it's quite engaging, like clip on YouTube or something. But if it's one after another, I would perhaps after a while think, well, how much time should I spend? I should probably not do it at all. Well, I don't think it's, I take that back. Usually I think of it as it's, to have fun is okay, because I don't think I've been too good at that earlier in my life. So I think it's, but, and so when that comes, and the same when it looks sort of comedy clips or anything, it's sort of a dopamine thing that you get addicted to, and you want more and more and more. Like, for example, when I have been looking on these gym things and training, I think it's a good motivation, but I don't know how much is sufficient or too much. But it's the same thing as a dopamine thing. You're searching for the next, and it's fun to do. But for me, I would be very much surprised if it's not the exact same brain process when I'm searching for something that's interesting and challenging, or interesting on a purely intellectual and philosophical, mainly intellectual level in understanding life and making better, like wisdom searching, basically. Which actually one topic they discuss with wisdom, and it's focused on actually a bit on attention and those type of things. And so, but that's, so for me, it's hard to evaluate what it is that makes you, like, for example, if it's a jackpot, I would probably watch the whole 3 hours. And sometimes if it's not a jackpot, it's still engaging, or maybe it's maybe not engaging. skip to the next video and do something else. I mean, there are many factors, like have you caffeine in your body, are you tired, how's the speaking abilities of those you're listening to, is it hard to understand them because of bad sound, or are they having a come from different countries, or it's hard to understand their English or Swedish or whatever language they're trying to communicate on. And is it, as I said, are they a good speaker, intriguing to listen to? There are many factors, and the subject itself. Like for me, for example, or how much do you agree with them? Because for some things, I found that I found sort of, well, there was nothing that sort of engaged me. And this is actually very interesting because, I don't know, it's as if, no, this is, because some thoughts and some theories and some are not for me as pleasant to listen to, or it's sort of, when I'm listening to it, it's somewhat, and that's like, for example, this video, I really liked it, but I was on search of something. I have quite high expectations, so I was sorting out those things, and I never watched the whole thing. I didn't feel like I had 3 hours, but so, and I wonder what it is when, for example, when I decide to know I'm going to skip this part, I'm going to see further in the video, because it's chunked in part with themes, and so you see the name of it, and then I navigated out of that. But what is it that happens when the brain goes, no, not this, when you're searching for something? As I found, it's something that going to make me sure, is going to, I guess I navigate from out of myself, how going to make me wiser, or make better decisions, or just contributing to my understanding of things, or anything. And sometimes it was as if when it's quite of, it's somewhat, it's difficult because you want to develop your brain, you want to be sharpened, you want to get digestion, be exposed to and listen to and engage with knowledge that makes your brain better, basically. But when you're starting, it's hard to know when the dopamine goes down and you're starting to want something more. Is it because it is not on a high level? Is it because the level is too high for you to understand? Is it because, so it could be too high, or it could be too low? And what is even high and low? Accuracy is, of course, and so I guess if you don't agree, or if you're how relevant you think it is, I mean, it's quite hard to, you're always making those decisions, but you sort of, well, but one thought about this is that if it's too, it could be that it's, oftentimes the things that you have heard about and are familiar with are usually things that you will draw your attention to. And so, but not always. I mean, something that you recognize but sort of don't sympathize with, or think, or are not sure is extremely relevant. They can also come off as sort of not dopamine producing, sort of. So, and it's hard to know. I mean, in some things, when I have what I've done usually for quite some times now, quite some years now, what I did not do as much earlier when I sort of studied a lot, like sort of military discipline, you study to get your grades and so forth. I've more and more started to go after interest. That made me go into philosophy for a time. It did it earlier in my life too, when I studied teenage period, like Wikipedia pages and stuff about philosophers and so, and but then it was genuine. I never studied it, I've never ever, basically never heard anything about philosophy in my whole like curriculum when I grew up, which is insane. But anyway, it was when I went off for it was pure interest, and so I sort of, which I'm very grateful that I realized that it's such a value, and I should not throw it away and just think it's about military discipline to get through school and bang things in your head. It's actually about genuine interest and how important that is for understanding and developing your brain and so forth. But that makes it hard to know when are you presented some things, knowledge that are perhaps, could it be that what does not trigger your dopamine because it's and if it's necessary to have that dopamine, I guess it's dopamine, but that rush in invest at least in some level to have a motivation and understand things, but and it could be quite long term too. You know, if I'm going through this, I know I will understand that. But when you're exploring ideas and listening or reading or whatever, if it's not that, is that because it's not relevant for your brain, or is it like what the criteria for your brain thinking it's engaging and interesting? I mean, what I'm getting at is if that positive emotion that I've tried to develop more and more into delving into interesting topics, can that be misguided in sometimes when I'm exposed to something new that I'm not. I mean, it could be two ways. If something new could be extremely engaging because it's like, whoa, and you could go like that, but you could also go like, that's, and I'm, as a person, I think I scored quite high, if I remember correct, on openness to experience. So I'm generally interested in, but I still get that response like, not this, even if it's something that I guess would be on a high level. I mean, but high level and relevant. I mean, accurate. It's it's hard to distinguish because if you're not thinking, basically, I don't know really what I'm getting at here, but my point is, if shouldn't it be considered relevant if it's for a higher accuracy? Should it to be not accurate or not important? I don't know. Perhaps I can remember something about it in this discussion. Like, for example, I found the ending part. Whoops! I just sat on my glasses, but it's fine. Like, for some of the end parts I found very interesting. The part that was talked about Marxism, Nazism, and this was not really the topic at all in the early parts of the video. Nazism, Marxism, and Nazism, and so it's actually political, and I guess it's thus intriguing. And it was about advice for people, and it especially, and it was all about Freud and Jung, And this is sometimes I can be somewhat skeptical when I hear that, because I'm not sure. Sometimes it feels as if a lot of people that are not necessarily intelligent can be drawn into it, even though there are a lot of intelligent people who are actually, took some time, but I realized that quite many people, intelligent people, who actually support sort of Jung and Freud's views, or at least their thinking has something to contribute with. And for me, sort of my mind have always have somewhat placed there along placed them among sort of, should we call it, woo woo, sort of flum flum, as we call it in Swedish. Could I give a good example of someone who is that like that? Let's say just some poet that not really saying some things, and it's considered by some people really smart, but it's really not that smart. That sort of category. Not, but anyway, and he just went into that in a short while, but so what was interesting to me was that, well, one interesting thought was that, what did he say about Hegel? He talked about Marxism and Hegel, and he said that what Hegel did was he basically tried to fit together philosophy and religion and trying to make the things I remember from it is that, yeah, he talks about sort of, I don't know the English terminology, but the spirit sort of and it's interesting because much of like all that time, the God and Christianity have been such a concept or something in people's thoughts that's been so deeply embedded in the mind that, of course, it's very interesting when you're trying to. And he also mentioned that Nazi is very strange to view Nazism is more, instead of a political ideology, you must much more think about it as a religious thing. And for me, it's like, yeah, sure, but yeah, well, that's, yeah, but yeah, ideology is basically many times as a religion. It's not, and I find it very natural that that's a big thing when we're not have religions anymore. It's sort of almost obvious. So, and I'm so thankful that he made that comparisons, because it's spot on. But so that, but I tried to remember what I did not found. Yeah, he's talking about, because I'm really interested in sort of the attention thing, but maybe it's just because my brain doesn't have too much of a scientific mind. I want to think that I'm really rational and can really, maybe I'm just too dopamine searching in this stage, because some scientific exploration for me seems somewhat mundane, if that's the right word, like some cognitive science stuff. But maybe that's just because I think it's sort of I'm not sure if a neuroscientist or something, but I mean, there is something in neuroscience that I don't like, sort of, that I'm not. It's as if I think that there's some huge piece that's missing, but at the same time, I think it's so interesting because like for example, Sam Harris went down. I think it's a neuroscientist, yeah, and they delved deep to that, and I guess in conjunction in to consciousness and so forth, and I'm really interested in it. And it went on to free will debate, and free argues that there is no free will because you don't shows your thoughts, shoots your thoughts, and yeah, I get his thought, but and maybe many of these things could be like maybe it is as boring as that just consciousness pops up when something is complicated and that, and it's just reductionism. And yes, that's just because there is some like one compelling argument that I have sort of bumped into or even sort of organized myself is just that since we're so extremely prone to just put ourselves in the middle so often, like we always thought that the sun was circulating around the Earth, and yeah, the Earth was the center of the universe, or then we all, and what I've forgotten my theories on it, but we always thought that there's so many times we put the egocentric, like in the same way the heliocentric was not easy to grasp because we just assumed the Earth was in the middle, and that's how it appeared to us. But we always think of ourselves so. I forgot the other parts, but that was one example with the Earth. But I had some others. But it's not, and well, our whole existence and how we act, that we have so hard time to accept that consciousness is not more deep or it basically close to what is he called Daniel, not Kahneman, what Kahneman, what's his name, the guy who's often presented between Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and some other guy, Daniel Dennis, I think. He said something like, consciousness is an illusion or something like that. And all these sort of explanation is, to me, sort of, I found them extremely boring and too boring to be true. Not even, but there is sort of an intellectual, intelligent twist on it, or that could be, and as an argument that we just place too much importance on consciousness, and it's just something that's, but still I'm not sure that addresses the core issue, but that's at least there's some, or not too bad arguments, but I'm not delved. It's a long time I thought about these things, and I'm not long time I engaged in, read about it, and but it's, yeah, why do I start to talk about that? I don't see why that. Yeah, in the video, what I did not found engaging, he talked about sort of not only the, like, what you put your attention to, that's really interesting, but it's hard to talk about what's not. There's so many things that we unconsciously just process in ourselves, and for some reason I did not find it. I mean, it is interesting, because when I think about it myself now, I realize that's really interesting, because there's a lot of things that just going into our brains, and it's just affecting us, of course, a lot. like for example, small things that's sort of on a very not unconscious but sort of low conscious level, and it's in the next moment or day or something, your attention is sort of weighted in direction to that thing, so you're seeing it easier and so forth. And it's think about all the things that we do not notice, and so forth. And that's of course interesting, but yeah, I am not sure. Um, I'm not sure how that's sort of a bit hard in here. How that's it's something that just makes me not as interested in it. And that happens. I mean, I still, because I mean, you could not be interested in intellectual discussion, and it's natural that you're not interested in every subject. But that's the thing that I'm interested in here, but because I usually find that I mean, philosophy is like it was really interesting his take on. I was actually surprised in a very positive way by his depth and his connection to these kind of things. It showed that he was really wide reader and thinker, because he said that I think he said that Kierkegaard, as an existentialist, Kierkegaard said about Hegel that he created, or if it was Marx, I think it was Hegel, that he created a system and then you sat by it, and then you sit beside it. And I guess what he meant is, I don't remember the discussion exactly, but that it's not in. Yeah, I think it was perhaps during a discussion about motivations, and he mentioned similar view to what I have and have learned, that motivations, of course, you have multiple motivations. You can be motivated by different things, and people are more prone to be motivated by some things and so forth. But I think perhaps it was in relation to that. But what I trying to get to here is that, and I'm wondering if it's not a coincidence that he says that he was grown up as a Christian and had a period where he was sort of straight out sort of atheist, and then trying to grapple with existential, and he had sort of described it as sort of like all these, I guess it is dopamine things, that all these rewards and all these positive things in church that he sort of found as engaging, that they were law, and he put, I don't remember if he described it as sort of a blackness, and I can understand that because he was served explanations that was intriguing in a narrative and so forth in the Christian mythology and so forth. But and all these guys like Kierkegaard, Freud, and I will actually say Hitler, and Freud and what's his name, Jung, all these, and I throw in Hitler there because yes, it is political ideology is like making a sword, and perhaps Marx, but I do not understand Marx in that because Marxism has never for me been it's never in Sweden we say it has not slagit en ton, put up a tone. It doesn't resonate with me in something. Whereas of course Nazism is as it is, it's horrible, but I can still understand this sort of grandness of creating something new. And perhaps that's the same with Marxism. Just I'm not. I guess the visual is more used in Nazism. It's like sort of, yeah. It's and he puts arguments for this, like this fascist guy is a religious symbol for and so forth. But my point here is that in some type of arguments, scientific arguments, it's hard to know if the lack of sort of engagement and dopamine is just because of that you're not, you're just too uninterested in it for it to trigger that dopamine thing, even if it's really relevant and rational thinking. Or sometimes because or is that lack of that a sign of that it is somewhat irrational, or is not connected to something relevant in the same way as these thinkers and so forth were? Because when I say relevant, not necessarily good, I mean Nazism is like hell, but it still had in motivation, I mean, the reality of what that motivation and that sort of trigger in the brain for people, it's still something. If you try to think about it scientifically, it's obvious there is something, or psychologically something that's it's an extreme effect, and everything that's extreme is of course of interest and understanding scientifically. And then we take all these emotions sort of connection to these philosophers, and like, I mean, it's maybe it is just that we have a desire, some of us, I guess all of us to some degree, for that feeling of, for example, I love the thought about the bearing trolls and other mystic things in the forest. Of course, that's extremely like living in that reality, even though it's not what we usually think of as true. I don't even want to say it's not true because it's so nice to think of it that way. Maybe that's just something that hijacks our mind and robs us from truth, but in some way it seems as if there's a lot of, I mean, these type of emotions and how we sort of like, for example, Einstein had a quite quiet, no, but a quite sort of religious conception of existence, or spiritual, at least in when it comes to God and stuff. So it's hard to understand how rationality is coupled or not disengaged, or coupled or disengaged. how intelligence is coupled or disengaged with that sort of emotional, should we say, spiritual feelings, and so and all that connection to. I mean, take someone such. I'm just thinking of myself now, David Hume or Descartes, or I mean, it's just intellectual activity, right? It's just rational thinking, isn't it? Spinoza, if you're thinking about Einstein, sort of thread here. But if you take the other side, the more that seems more rational and not just feelings involved. I mean, my brain does not want to think that that's the thing, sort of. But there's so many times that the emotional brain can be sort of drawn to something, because I think like all the people that you see of this is, how should you put it, less fortunate in their intellectual capacities, standing on street and yelling political views. I mean, those emotions, I mean, maybe I'm the same thing, but just on another, but they're still just distracting me from, or they still just distract me in the same way as I see those people just being emotional about things that you should be intellectual, discussing, and rational about, are all my feelings and those sort of things. Same kind of, you should not engage in it, you should just be rational. There's something in me that do not want to believe that's true. But at the same time, that sort of intellectual curiosity that you have, or you hopefully have, that is also sort of on a mystic touch to it, and so I don't know, it's something about it. And at the same time, it's never, even if you're delving into some things, it's not, you're never robbed of it. It's still an emotion and so forth. I mean, there's so many things we don't understand. And it's also interesting that this guy who has been brought up in sort of a Christian thing and then left it, like he's very focused on love, which is one of the, perhaps the most positive thing about Christianity, is the emphasis on love, I guess. I unfortunately, well, to be honest, I have to say that distance that I don't like to things like sort of emotional things, that sometimes I feel as if people are theorizing about some things that is irrelevant or not relevant because there's not an emotional, intriguing, mystic touch to it, sort of as I read it as an indications that it's touching something really relevant or something, I can get that same. It's I may come off as not as a loving person, but when I hear people speak about love in that sense, I do not know why, but there is something in my brain that goes, or quite the opposite. There's nothing in my brain. I do not get that emotional stir of love, but on a rational level, this is backwards in my brain, because I usually want to be engaged in the emotions and so forth. But on that, well, I'm more rational. I'm about, for me, it's, I mean, love and doing good for people is such a extremely important, and it basically the only thing I navigate my life around. And it's even like the meaning of a life. I mean, it's even. I mean, for me, the answer is obvious. I don't know why we even debate it or discuss it, but of course, it is to do so much good you possibly can to humanity or all species and so forth. But I do not have that, like, I guess, and I'll also read much history from one who is did exactly the same journey, but through Jesuits and Catholicism, and he's quite similar than that guy. I guess he's Protestant, but he could be Catholic. I don't know. I think he was Protestant. But both those have a quite strong connection to the word love, and just loving, love and so forth. And I think that it's not a coincidence that they've been grown up in a similar milieu. But this is not an argument about Christianity, or what it is, but maybe it's an argument that it seems as if some people have that crave for a sort of some emotional touch to the intellectual systems or thoughts that they try to come up with, and in connection to meaning, and also sort of pure rational rationality was, and yeah, I don't know, is it because of that, or is it in spite of that? That's really the question. Is it something bad, or is it something good that rides? Or is it just something that's not good but just gives you motivation, so it's good anyway? Sort of. I mean, I don't like that view, but I have to consider it because I have to be rational, right? So it's and I found that most of these things like, for example, like Kierkegaard said about Hegel, that he made a system, an amazing system, and then he just sat beside it, like sort of this agency to just do stuff in life and the connection to the life itself. I mean, those are the most interesting things. Like, I mean, in Christianity or religion, you have that served as a complete whole, which you do not have when you grow up in a secular country or setting or so forth. And That's now I lost my train of thought, but uh, and that's why, by the way, I have a. That's why meditation or like Buddhism for me comes off as quite not mundane. And I say this as a person who meditated for 11 years. I started when I was, I guess, 16 or something, and moved for the most part. I had some periods, perhaps in total 1 year. So maybe I've been meditating for 9.5 years, if you're or something like that, if you count the days, but basically 11 years. And but there's some emptiness in Buddhism that for me is just like, and all those things like Kierkegaard, Nazis, Marxists perhaps, Freud, and basically all the German, I found most German, and who knows, perhaps that was, I do not want to believe that that's the case, but perhaps that's one of the reasons that there was so much force in Germany. I do not want to believe that. Actually, I think what Munger described Germany before before Hitler, he said that it was basically I think he said the most civilized or advanced nation. I'm not sure if he said, well, I guess America would be before, I don't know, but Great Britain was, I guess, not as, they had their peak, but it was still extremely advanced and so forth. And he just warned for how nation could just suddenly get into something like that. But I found, I don't know why, but it's something about the I mean, I think when I studied this at university, some courses, they talked about, I think, analytic philosophy and continental philosophy. Continental as being on the continent, I guess France and Germany and so forth, in contrast to like analytic in, I guess, Great Britain, America, Sweden, I don't know, but and they said that on this university we're engaged in analytical philosophy. I think that was the name, which is sort of fine, but many, and for me it's like what they call continental philosophy is basically what could be described either as like just philosopher that really try to get to the depths of things and not just scratching the rational, unemotional surface. It's actually going deep. Or it could be described as flum, as we call it in Swedish, or just woo-woo. It's just how some people view Kierkegaard and Freud and Jung. It's just theories and lots of texts, and it's not saying anything really of substance. And that's because many of the German, if not all of them, like Hegel it's quite much. It's sort of a mystery in it, and again, it's really hard to see if that's really a good thing or really a bad thing. If it's in the way of rational advancement, or if it's necessary for it. It's a part of it, or something to be. So that's time's ticking. I think I'm going to sleep now, but yeah, it's interesting to think about. Yeah, I guess so. And on that note, yeah, life is a lot about thinking about things and then making decisions, but having a really good foundation in those type of thoughts and then just translating into wise decisions in life and trying to get a wise and good outcome in life. That's the tricky part. And that's why it's interesting with Stoicism, for example. That's really good for just dealing with pain and dealing with the life. But it's, yeah. But that's more on the, yeah, I should probably wrap it up here. But yeah, I'm really tired. So that'll be the end of it. I braved you. No, I saved you from not hearing just about deadlifts and stuff the whole video. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, who knows. But I'm pretty proud of my deadlifts. But definitely not satisfied. And on that note,